Creativity is your superpower, but to tap into it, you need to put yourself out there. You need to be a little cringe. But it's totally worth it. Creativity is about much more than Ernest Hemingway sipping a glass of red wine in Barcelona and writing in his journal. It's about solving hard problems, inspiring other people, putting your little dent on the universe. In this episode of the Examine Life podcast, I interviewed Jeff Madoff, a true Renaissance man. Jeff's a fashion designer, a playwright, an author, an entrepreneur, and he teaches a course at Parsons on how to make a living in a creative career. You'll learn how to start new projects, overcome the fear of failure, and make the creative process something you truly enjoy. I hope you enjoy this episode. Our question today is one that's near and dear to my heart. What is creativity? Good to have you here, Jeff.
Well, thank you for having me on.
We reconnected after many, many years in New York recently at an event. And as people were, there was a bunch of meet and greets and prompts. And as you introduced yourself to new faces there, how did you describe yourself?
Interestingly, I usually don't. I just start talking and until somebody asks, I don't want to be a human billboard promoting who I am. And, if the conversation is engaging and somebody says, well, what do you do? Then I tell them. So I don't sort of lead with, here's who I am and look at my resume before we speak. Because, you may not be interested in me. I may not be interested in you. And I think the true way to find out is you just start to talk with each other without qualification and see if the result of talking to each other is engagement or you're already looking for the exit from that group to some other. And, as I anticipated when I got the invitation to your gathering was it would be nice people, it'd be good people. And it was really nice. But, so I don't usually lead with that. If people say to me, so what is it that you do?
Mm-hmm. Someone asked you that at the event.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I said, well, it depends on when you ask. But I've had a number of different careers. And that's a whole other question, by the way, is what is a career anymore? Do they even exist? Do careers actually exist anymore? So I just give a very quick capsule of that. I started off as a fashion designer, started my own company, built that up. I moved to New York, started a film production company, was a producer and director for many, many years, over 40 years, for clients such as Ralph Lauren, Victoria's Secret, Harvard School for Public Health, just a wide range, Radio City Music Hall, the Metropolitan Museum, a lot of things like that. Taught a course called Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas at Parsons School of Design in New York City. Wrote a book.
Which I audited while I was still working at BlackRock 10 years ago.
That's right. That's where we were just children then. I don't even think you were able yet to grow a beard, if I'm not mistaken. And
I definitely didn't drink.
You did. I didn't check what was in your bottle. You did have something, but so most recently I've sort of added to that list, which is playwright, where my play Personality, the Lloyd Price musical, which I'm also the lead producer on. We had our first commercial run in 2022, and then we finished a run this summer in Chicago, and we're now heading to England for the next iteration of the production. So I've done a number of different things, and some of them overlapping, like the teaching and the writing the book and doing the film work. But that's kind of the quick capsule of the various things I've done.
You are a true multi-hyphenate. So I am. It is an honor, and it's. I mean, how many lifetimes did you live to accomplish all of those different things?
I don't have any evidence that there's any more than one. So I just want to try to.
My daughter, my 6-year-old, has been asking about reincarnation, and she's like, "Can you come back as a stone? Can you come back as a grapefruit?" The other day, she said, "Can you come back as a butt cheek?"
Just one? Just one butt cheek?
Yes, just one butt cheek. But Jeff, as you look at your that range of careers, so fashion designer, film producer, college professor, author, and playwright. Those are five. I think I'm probably missing one or two. With the benefit of hindsight, can you pull out a through line
Yeah, oh yeah.
on it? What's the through
You,
line?
the through line is that I always went after things that were interesting to me. And so the through line is engagement and a
I love
sense
that.
of what I was doing. I had fun doing that. It gave me the opportunity to constantly learn, that I was engaged and loved the process of what I was doing.
Mhm.
Because I think loving process, which is where all the work actually happens,
Yeah.
is really important. So the through line was always that. I never let the fact that I didn't know anything about the business I was going into, I never let that stop me. Uh,
Yeah.
I was ignorant of each of those fields when I started them, but I'm not stupid. And
No.
ignorant, you can learn, stupid's forever. Yeah. So, it was always, wow, that's really interesting. And I could have
Mm.
never predicted any of those things that I was going to go
Yeah.
after. There's no master plan. And it is that just what excites me, what lights me
Yeah.
up, what gets me going.
It's so amazing. And for listeners, Jeff and I connected a decade, maybe 8 years ago, and then we haven't seen each other since, but have been tracking each other through the socials and so on. And it's uncanny to hear you say that. You said engagement, and I forget the other phrase that you said. But one thing in my coaching practice and in just my life mantra is to follow aliveness. And, I've been thinking, people are like, what are your goals for 2024? We're recording this in January. It'll come out in February. What are my goals? I did say I have a goal to meditate an hour a day and then just to continue pursuing aliveness. Because as you said, the process, the aliveness, the engagement, the fun, follow the fun. I think if you have above average intelligence and a little bit of determination, if you follow the fun and the aliveness, you're going to end up in a good place. And even if you don't, you wouldn't have regretted it.
Well, so that begs two questions. Number
Yeah.
one, how do you define aliveness?
Mm.
And what is that in contrast to?
How do you define aliveness? So maybe what is it in contrast to is like dead, feeling dead inside. I know that one phrase, I think it's a Zeppelin song. I'm not a big Zeppelin fan, but comfortably numb. I think that a lot of folks that are listening to this podcast, that are in these kind of high performing jobs, demanding jobs that are very one dimensional, very extrinsically motivated, have this kind of comfortably numb feeling. So that's what aliveness is not, or in contrast to. One of the things of aliveness, I think, is you forget to go to the bathroom. So it's like, well, what are things that you're so obsessed with and engaged that you forget to go to the bathroom to do? That would be one.
Now,
Another,
is that to say, by the way, that when you're
I have a
doing your
cup
work,
under my.
yeah, are you wearing an adult diaper or what do you?
Oh, yes. That's a visual that we all could use without. But I was an adult baby for Halloween and when I was 26 once. So, but I think another one is there's no need for you. You mentioned the process. There's no need for the reward. And I'm very careful on this because I always ask myself this question. I love writing. I write every day. But if I were to write something beautiful, I would be deeply engaged in the process. I'm writing a 5,000 word essay on the post-achievement professional this weekend. So I love writing, but if I hit delete, when I was done, I wouldn't have the satisfaction. There's something would be missing. And so I always wonder, I'd love to hear your thought on this, is someone will say, I love writing, I love art, I love, making YouTube videos. And they do love the process, but I think, I'm calling bullshit on myself. I think we delude ourselves, because what I'm saying when I say I love writing is I love writing and I love validation. But I don't know the ratio. Is it 80 parts writing, 20 parts validation, 90-10, 50-50? And so I'm always careful with that, because what I was going to say is that aliveness kind of removes the outcome from the equation, but I still care about the outcome. I probably care a lot less than others, and I definitely care less than I used to, but I still care. So my question to you is, what do you think of how do you define aliveness? And how do you truly, do you have to become an ascetic monk and write and then like literally not care one drop about the outcome, just be obsessed with the craft? Or is that too idealistic of a vision for aliveness or detachment from the outcome?
I don't even think that it's possible.
Uh,
I think that we can have different outcomes, and it may not be the traditional outcome of, yeah, I wrote this and I was able to sell it, and I make a living doing that, and I love that. Doesn't mean that you don't love the process of writing.
never.
But we all do something with some kind of outcome, hoped for or otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think that you can love the process of writing, but to write and say, and I don't care, then why bother putting it down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that, it doesn't have to be a financial transaction,
Right.
but, if you write something and you post it and somebody comments intelligently and saying, and what you wrote really made me think about whatever, that's gratifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you might not have defined that outcome, uh,
No.
but we write, and like all creative activities, I think what we do is try to connect. And I think that those connections are what's profound and can reinforce the activity, and do that. And it's interesting because I've written a book and I've written a play. Now, writing the book is a very solo activity.
Yeah.
But once the book is done, you may get responses, critical reviews on Amazon or must reads and that kind of thing. When I did the play, when I'm sitting there during previews, and it's the first time that you have an actual paying audience come in, do they laugh at the jokes? Are they engaged with the music? Are they wrapped? Is their attention wrapped when there's a serious dramatic scene? And so I'm kind of seeing the mini outcomes and the overall impact that the play has. And that's a different kind of an outcome.
Yeah.
So I don't think that being detached from outcome, I don't look at that as an admirable trait. I look at that, honestly, I look at that as a self-protection mechanism, because I don't believe that anybody doesn't actually care.
Yeah.
That's self-protection. That's not how your emotions truly function. But you can set up that kind of wall. Yeah, it doesn't make any difference to me. I don't really care. I write for myself. Bullshit. I don't believe it. Because again, why else even put it down?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I get, there's definitely my Eastern philosophy influence there, where, there's a quote that I really love from the Bhagavad Gita that is, you have the right to your work, but not the fruits of your work. And so I feel like there's this balance between clinging too much to the outcome and the control that one seeks, versus the true kind of Buddhist Zen detachment, where it's like, it doesn't, like nothing matters, right? And you're like, there's a healthy sweet spot, I suspect, between those two polarities.
Well, if nothing matters, then neither does that concept of nothing matters.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So everything is kind of reduced to nothingness.
Yeah.
And so, you know, why not enjoy the fruits of your labor?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, what's the matter with that?
Mhm.
And by the way, that can mean just sharing it with a few friends.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when you started off, and one of the ways we kept in touch is, you know, I would get your newsletter and your blogs or whatever, and, you know, read kind of, you were documenting what you were going through in many ways.
Mhm.
That mattered to you,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it's led to what you're doing today, and
Yeah.
having, you know, 75 people or however many show up at your thing because they're interested in you, and that's part of the outcome.
Yeah.
So I think that there's nothing to matter with having a desired outcome or
Yeah.
embracing some outcome that you didn't expect, or
Yeah.
learning from something because the outcome wasn't what you expected.
Yeah.
But I don't see anything noble in detachment.
Yeah.
From detachment, I see self-protection
Oh,
and
yeah.
fear.
Avoidant. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as much avoidance. It's that I think in order to be creative, truly, you also have to put yourself at risk. And putting
Yeah.
yourself at risk means you put your ideas out there. Not everybody's going to like them, and you're going to
Yeah.
get criticism and, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And so a way to protect yourself from that is basically, you know, I don't really care,
Yeah.
you know, because
Yeah.
it comes to, I'll just add this, it comes to the difference. Love and hate are not opposites. The opposite of love or the opposite of hate is indifference. And indifference, when somebody just doesn't care, there's nothing worse to be on the
Yeah.
receiving end of that. If you have a
Wow.
relationship that goes bad or whatever.
Yeah. Ooh, so good. So good. All right. So we jumped the gun on our question, but our question for today is, what is creativity? And for those of you listening, if you want to join one of our upcoming group coaching cohorts, where we discuss questions like creativity and putting yourself out there and starting new projects, check out radreads.co/coaching. Okay, so Jeff, you mentioned this is a very, very common question on creativity, and I see it more through the lens of social media, but it could be through any creative act. It is the fear of being perceived as cringe. And the number of people that say, I have this idea that I want to write about on LinkedIn, or I have this photo, this little video of myself talking that I want to put on Instagram or YouTube. But I am so scared of my friends back channeling a group chat that say, did you see what Khe put out there? Which by the way, has happened to me many times. I have found out ex post. What's happening in that? Because we talked about this kind of self-protection. What's happening in this moment of creative desire meets world writ large and scary people that want to talk shit and tear you down? And, you know, all through this lens of cringe. I'd love for you to break that down, how you see it.
And are you talking about cringe is folded into that, the notion of, am I an imposter, an imposter syndrome, or?
I think it could. I don't even, I think it's before imposter.
Mhm.
It's more just like, I'm scared of criticism.
Right. Okay.
I think it's
So,
the cringe is the critique is that the thing you did is cringeworthy, and to
mhm.
be labeled cringeworthy is, you know, is the whole public speaking thing. It's like, I'd rather be dead than embarrass myself on a stage.
Yeah, I'd much rather embarrass myself on the stage because that would even give me another good story.
Then we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, that doesn't mean, the thing about it is, if you look at it, that, you know, everything's another chapter, everything's another
Mhm.
story. And sometimes those stories of things that didn't go well are what makes a story interesting
Yeah.
and gives you the opportunity to learn from something that you did.
Mhm.
Uh, Criticism never feels good.
Yeah.
However, like in theater, we call it notes. The director or me will give notes about a performance or what we'd like to see. Now, of course, it depends on who's giving the notes, whether they're mean, whether they have compassion for what you're trying to do, or empathy for the position that you're in. And my feeling is that if you are afraid of being criticized, from the get-go, you are so handicapping what it is you can do, because there are two really important factors. One is confidence, and the other is courage in terms of being creative and taking risk in any aspect of your life. And the difference between confidence and courage is that confidence, you have a reasonable belief that the outcome is going to be positive because you've done it enough times before and the outcome is usually good. So you have the confidence when called upon that you can do that particular thing, that capability, that you can do that and things are going to be okay. Courage, on the other hand, is you're stepping off the edge into the darkness. You don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you're going to risk that because being creative, part of that is that compelling need to get your stuff out there.
Yeah.
And I think that with creative people, they both don't want the criticism because nobody does, but they also, they want to get their stuff out there.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of part of the package, because there's always going to be people not being too nice about it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is when it's really positive, and I fortunately have that with my director, it's a great collaboration. And everything I have done, and when I'm teaching, I'm collaborating with the students. When I'm filmmaking, I'm collaborating with the talents in front of the camera, my cinematographer, all of that. When I'm writing, I'm collaborating with my editor. And so there's a healthy exchange of ideas.
Yeah.
But you can't control other people's responses to you.
Yeah.
That's the part about the fruits of your labor. I believe you should enjoy the fruits of your labor. I think there's nothing the matter with being happy with what you've done. In fact, I think that's a worthwhile goal, is to be happy and fulfilled. Otherwise, why are you doing it? You could be doing something else. So I think I think that people are afraid of the risk. And if you're afraid of the risk, you have to have the courage to step into that darkness where you don't know the outcome. But if you do that enough, you can build the confidence, and that stretches you emotionally and intellectually as a person to be able to do more. And have a richer form of expression as a result of it, because you've stretched your boundaries.
There's a few things that come out. One is just, it's funny how branding works, right? When you shift criticism to notes, notes feels so much, that's so empowering. It's so intellectual. It's so wise. Criticisms, the scary, scary monsters. So I was just observing on the branding of in the world, I guess, of playwrights. And then the other is, as you got to it, is confidence comes from the repetition, but before you get confidence, you needed to have the courage at some point, right? Because you never start.
That's right.
You never start. How does one practice courage?
By doing things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
When I say doing things that are uncomfortable, I'm not talking about walking over hot coals, or pulling, barbed wire up from your ass through your esophagus. I'm not talking about things like that.
Tony Robbins or David Blaine?
Yes, two great therapists. And, that's like circus stuff. I think that the things that scare us, there are things to be legitimately afraid of, and so what I'm talking about is, what's the worst possible thing that could happen if you put out a blog post and people don't like it? you get no reaction. That's the worst thing. If you get dueling reactions that this person, it triggered a person in a negative way, but then somebody else defends it and they get into their whole online dialogue and it engages people, that could be pretty cool. You don't know any of that until you put it out there. So if you expect to grow as a creative person, I think that risk is essentially an absolutely necessary part of that. And the question that I think that breeds is, what are you afraid of? And what is failure? How do you define failure? I mean, how do you define failure?
God, that's a great question. And my answer would have probably evolved over the years, but I'm very much of the school of control what, put in your reps, put in your process, control what you can control. And so failure is when I know that there's something that I should be doing and I don't do it to the extent that I know in my core it needs to be done. And then I don't get the outcome that I want. So that would be kind of one way I think of failure. Another way would be, sometimes you work, I could think with this, when we had 5 employees before we laid four people off, I did everything in my power to grow the business that could support 5 employees. And it just turned out that it was the wrong business. And so there was nothing I could have done differently in the path that I had created. And so in that regards, it was a failure in the sense that, I had a plan. I executed the plan to the best of my abilities. I really put in 120%. But the outcome wasn't what I wanted. And in this case, other people's lives were impacted, right? That's probably the hardest part about the failure is when something that, I am spearheading, I'm, ultimately responsible for, doesn't work out and other people's lives are impacted. That I view that as a failure of sorts. That being said, though, that's changed a lot for me over the years. In the past, it was just, there's a benchmark that needs to be hit. Like, I don't know, you're a top student in your high school, you have to go to an Ivy League school. If you don't go, you're a failure, and if you do go. And to be honest, by a lot of objective benchmarks in my life, especially when my life had a much more linear path, I usually cleared what in my mind would have been the failure point, so to speak, whether it's promotions and so on. So to recap, I think I don't think, to me, failure is not upholding your commitments, right? And when you honor your commitments, you might not get the desired outcome. I don't really, you have failed, but I don't view that as a disappointing failure, so to speak.
So what you were doing this is from our conversation when we saw each other a couple of weeks ago, you were doing online curriculum, right?
Yes.
Which grew,
online productivity courses.
And which grew during COVID when everybody was sort of at home looking for things to do.
Stimulus checks.
Yeah. And then once coming out of COVID, you could no longer support the business that you had built because it was, I guess, at a weird blip in our history, so to speak.
Exactly. Zoom calls. Our selling point used to be, we have 76 hours of Zoom calls. And people were like, yes. And then, the world reopened and they're like, go fuck yourself. Zoom became the ultimate 4-letter word.
But for what you have done since, is it fair to say that in a way it's an extension on what you were doing before in terms of the message that you want to communicate? But you're doing it differently.
Yes.
So you haven't failed in your mission, but that method of getting it out there was no longer working or no longer relevant. Yeah. And to me, failure And I think you said it well when you said it was it's failure to you was not living up to your commitments.
Yeah.
But I also think that failure is giving up on something that has importance and meaning to you. Now, there are times you should let go, but there are other times that what you learned as a result of it, like what you've been doing since,
Yeah.
is those same messages of productivity and all of the things that are important to you are still very much in what you communicate and what you do.
Yeah.
You're just doing it differently.
Yeah.
S-
No, thank you.
So I
It's
think
nice
that's
to
really
feel
but
seen that way.
Pardon?
It's nice to feel seen that way. So thank you.
Well, but I think that's what it is. It's not like, oh yeah, Khe now he's baking bread. You know, he's selling bread online now. You know, he's given up on communicating anything about people's values and commitments, but he's got a hell of a sourdough he learned how to make during COVID.
I hear you. What about though the letting other people down? And again, I'm very careful. I don't feel like I failed because I did everything in my power to in my own mind. But people's lives were impacted, you know, and
How are they impacted?
loss of a paycheck, you know, in a loss of a paycheck in a challenging economy. That would be one thing. I think another that was pretty hard for me was that, you know, some people that joined our company could have gotten jobs at Facebook, and you know, they made it. This is what it is, Jeff. People made a bet on me, and I didn't deliver to the individuals in reciprocity of the bet that they had made on me. And so I don't view it as a failure, but I was very disappointed about that.
And what is making a bet? What was their incentive for making that bet?
Well, I don't want to speak for them, but if I were to
but
triangulate,
you are speaking for them when you're talking about the disappointment about the paycheck, and you know, you didn't say don't take the job at Facebook. You know, you didn't say that to them.
You're right. I think the bet was, well, I know that part of the bet was the mission. They believe in the mission, the values of the company, of how we work, how we respect one another. Like, for example, we work 30-hour weeks. There's no concept of a work day, right? It's unlimited vacation, and it's built on trust, psychological safety. Like I really cared. I took all the things that I had read and learned about people and relationships and organizational design and wanted to apply them to a company. So I think the bet was on the mission, the way the company was structured, and the ability to experience a unique career path.
Right. So they were therefore placing a bet on doing something that they found appealing and that they would be, you know, over time remunerated for.
Yep.
Was that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. So because a wager involves two sides. Somebody's placing a bet, they're looking for some kind of a positive outcome on that bet. Yeah. And the information is, you know, whether you're playing poker or you're deciding on a job, one over the other or something else. So it's a two-sided situation. There is no certainty. We don't know what's going to happen. So, you know, it's interesting because in theater, I've got about 19 investors.
Okay.
And we have to do, with every investor gets a prospectus, it's roughly like 35 pages of which 29 of them are disclaimers about, you know, you've
like
seen
act
that.
Of God, it's like a hurricane could destroy the theater and you won't get your money back.
And recognition of the risk, that it is a high risk proposition. Every startup is a high risk proposition because the vast majority of startups don't make it.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so those who joined up with you were at the very least looking for a job and found that to be appealing. And others were hoping, oh, this could potentially be a home run. I won't take that job at Facebook, but they made those decisions. So you put something out there, it didn't work out. There are no guarantees. And all of those people, I'm willing to bet 100% of them had a job before they took yours.
Yep.
So they were looking, whether it's they were newly available because they got laid off during COVID or whatever the hell it was. And so that aspect of what you were doing didn't work out. Doesn't mean you feel good about it, but I think it's important to realize the transactional nature of placing a bet.
Yeah. No, it's very helpful. So it's very helpful to hear you. And if I'm honest, I think part of something that I struggle with is taking too much on, right? Like you made a very balanced case that this was a two-side conversation, but in my, monkey brain, it's like, Khe, everyone, this was all on you and you didn't deliver, which is probably, it's probably a trait of entrepreneurs. It's probably a trait of a certain type of person, but it's helpful. It's helpful to hear it reflected back to me because I don't see the other side of it. Just like I would imagine the person who's like, this post is going to be cringe, like they don't see the other side, which is 99% of the time people just ignored it because there's too much stuff to read online. And then the 1% was like, okay, cool. And then, 0.01% was like, this is really good.
Yeah. And I suspect if you looked back in your life, I would suspect that something that you absorbed, whether it's parental or whatever, the not letting people down. And so, but it's interesting. I don't know what the word would be, but it's not you letting them down. It's not you letting them down. Believe me, I get the fact. I remember when I was 24, I had 120 people working for me. I had started my first company and I had to lay off the majority of them, all of whom were substantially older than me, most of whom had families and kids.
Yeah.
And that was rough. That was really rough. I wish that I could have talked to somebody back then. Eventually I did, but to get a bigger understanding of that, because I was also, pretty as used to it as you can be at 24. I had built the business quickly and successfully and all of that. And this was a pretty big hit, and it was a big hit emotionally. But, so many of these things in business and in life, but in business in particular, are bets. And it's important to look at that other side of it so that you don't take on a disproportionate amount of the emotional burden because you didn't force anybody to take the job.
Yeah. No,
and you did your best to try to make it happen.
Yeah. Can I ask you
No,
because
you
a lot
cannot.
of people listening are, it's been a tough stretch for entrepreneurs. Seems like it's starting to turn around a bit. Just reading today, Citigroup laid off 20,000, another 20,000 people. Google laid off people last week. When you were in that moment, when you're like, fuck, because I thought I was on top of the world, everything was going well, and I just laid off, I forget the number you said, 120 people with families. How did you pick yourself up? How did you reorient yourself to, because in many instances like that, people's confidence can get shattered, right? Amongst other things. I know my confidence was really badly bruised by that, that round of layoffs. How did you, or how have you learned or seen others kind of pick themselves up from these low points in different phases of career and business?
Well, for me, initially it was just hard to get out of bed in the morning because I didn't want to face the drag that was inevitably going to be that day and the next day and all of that. I didn't want to face with having to talk to the people and tell people that I had to lay them off. That was all really difficult because I had compassion for the positions that they were in. And, you know, it was tough, but I also knew that, you know, I couldn't stay under the covers in fetal position, you know, that life goes on. And again, I think that it's the word that is overlooked all the time in terms of entrepreneurship and being out there, putting your ideas out there and so on. And I think it's the most important word to understand is perseverance. Because it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to start. It's not hard to start a business. It's hard to grow it, even harder to sustain it. And, you know, that's a tough thing. And if you don't have the ability to persevere and be resilient enough to bounce back from some of the disappointments and obstacles that are inevitably going to happen, then, you know, you've got to learn how to deal with that in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you don't go through a period of grief and mourning for the business and all of that. But at some point, you need to just get going again.
Yeah.
And I think that whether you're an employee who's got to find another job or an entrepreneur that needs to reinvigorate or start another business, you know, you've got to understand the importance of that perseverance because so many things don't work out, you know, but that doesn't mean you give up.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fine line, I think, is where do my efforts go from commitment to being delusional, you know, because this ain't working and I got to make some hard decisions.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to click into that point because we're talking about creativity. We're recording in January. This will come out in February, and a lot of people are they're revving up their vision boards. They're firing up those 10-year plans. They're setting those intentions. They're picking the word that will define the year for them. A lot of folks listening to this will not start. They will. There's some project that they want to start a new job search, start a blog, start taking care of their health. Many will not start. I'm sorry for those of you listening, but I've seen this. That's why I have a coaching practice, is because many of you will not start. When it comes to these new projects, creative projects, why is it so? Why are they so hard? You said they're not that hard to start, but I think it was on a slightly different context. What makes starting a new creative project so hard?
Well, it's interesting. I think that again, some people it's not hard because they have such a flood of ideas. It's just basically not being paralyzed by the analysis and making a decision to move forward on this idea instead of that idea. Realizing that nothing is going to align perfectly. So what is it you most want to be doing? And it's a question that I asked all the guests in my class that I think is really important, that a lot of people, it's really interesting the response I get to this question. But it goes back to my core beliefs, which is, I would say, and I'll ask you this question, which is, if we would have known you when you were a kid, would we have seen the qualities and characteristics that we see in you now? And so if somebody who knew you when you were a kid say, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense what he's doing now. I totally get it. That's what he was like as a kid. Or, God, I would have never anticipated he'd do that because he always, you know, he was always a different kind of kid, never got along with anybody, and now he seems to care about everybody and all that sort of thing. What was it that lit you up as a kid?
Whoa. What lit me up as a kid? all right, it's going to sound, I'm going to say it. It was making money.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this insane amount of resourcefulness and creativity around that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this is a classic family story. I think I was 6 or 7 years old. We were in Thailand, in one of the beach islands, one of the islands, and I collected a bag full of hermit crabs. And I went up to the women, the local workers that were either cleaning the beach or selling fruit to the tourists. And I went up to them and said, do you want to buy these hermit crabs for, $3? And they like pretended they didn't speak English. They probably didn't speak English. And then I went to a German couple, tourists, and I said, do you want to buy my hermit crabs? And they kind of like, cute boy, pat on the head type stuff. And from that on, there was always this, I think is actually a tremendous creativity. I displayed a tremendous amount of creativity around ways to make money as a kid. And so if you look at my Wall Street career, my entrepreneurial career today, you wouldn't be surprised at all. And there was an intense dedication and determination. Another thing you wouldn't be surprised is that I was always a kind person, and I think I still am a kind person. So I think that was a kind of through line. I think the part that people would be surprised about, and I've surprised myself about, is a willingness to introspect and to really kind of rip the layers off of my, psyche, and a real like intensity to that. That was not that would be, not on the, 1997 Khe Hy bingo card. So that's how I'd answer.
Right. And I would say that what you've been doing, especially since leaving the financial markets, and especially from what I've read, so I can't claim to be up to date on everything, but you are doing those things now. The coaching is a part of that.
Yep.
Sharing the knowledge, profiting from the knowledge that you've accumulated over the years, all of that. And I think it's really important to understand what were those things that we really loved doing as kids.
Yeah.
And it leads back to what engaged, what lit you up, what was fun, what gave you gratification, all of those things. And, if you want to start a business, there's certain academic questions I think one needs to ask themselves, just in terms of being smart about starting a business. But I think that the emotional part of it, the decision to start something and put that idea out there, I think it's worth a deep dive into one's own psychology so you understand what moves you.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to the perseverance. If you don't really love it, it's going to be really hard to persevere through the difficulties.
And so if you looked at, you had incredible guests in your class, in your book, and you asked them all this question, what did childhood what lit up childhood you, and then contrast that to you as an entrepreneur, as a creative today, how would you synthesize the results of that, across hundreds of conversations? Were there any patterns?
I would say that the vast majority of people who are involved in what we call the arts, be they painters, musicians, actors, whatever, the vast majority of those, what they love doing as kids is what has matured into what their adult career is.
Got it.
And that is something that they had in their sights, forever. And there are people that had, let's say, the accidental successes. This is, again, a generalization, but there's not the same sense of gratification, because although they're doing really well financially, emotionally, there's a hollowness to it because they don't necessarily really love what they're doing. They love the fruits of the labor. They love the money. But emotionally, it's not satisfying. And at a certain point in life, if you examine it, some people, it's like, so is that all there is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
I
that,
mean, those are the people that
this is,
come to me for coaching. That's literally the question. Is that all there is to life? Is this it?
and my question would be to them, well, what do you think? What do you think?
Mm,
Is that all there is? Where did you come up with that belief that that's what it was in the first place? Why do you do
yeah.
what you do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll go back. I'll play that out in a different way, in a slightly different way, because when I often ask the childhood question to folks, and again, these are more people that are looking for a career pivot, so they've been in a more traditional field, finance, consulting, law, tech, and what immediately happens is they'll say something like, "I loved snowboarding," or "I love Magic the Gathering." And then immediately where their brain goes is, well, should I start a snowboarding company? Should I go become the CFO of Burton, or, controller at Burton? If it's Magic the Gathering, it's, can I, can I start a competitor? Can I invest? There is this immediate jump from childlike wonder and delight into monetization. How will this make me money? And there's a reality that, those folks do need to make money, but it feels like there's a bit of a, what is it, like a transformation, or, a misdirection of sorts, and an emotional catfishing of sorts that that immediately ends it, what often feels like a dead end. What do you think's happening in I know you haven't, maybe you've spoken to people that have this reaction, but what do you think's happening in that moment?
Happening in the moment that they discover that's not what they wanted, or
No, when they think that the thing that lit them up as a child needs to make them money as a 45-year-old.
I think that the calculus for the living one has to make, which depends on one's life circumstances and all of that. I started my first adult business, when I was 21. I had a lot of other jobs, but this was my first adult business when I started a company. And, what was interesting in reflecting on this is that we all construct our narratives through the rearview mirror. We don't really know until we're looking back as opposed to looking forward. And I think that a lot of times, because my business grew so quickly, what was interesting about that is I realized, and I think this happens to a lot of us, it becomes more about the momentum and capitalizing on the momentum. And you stop reflecting because you got so much shit to do all of a sudden, because everything is growing so quickly. You're having to hire people, you're having to find a bigger space, you're having to do all these kinds of things. And I think that, to me, money, success, all of those things are byproducts. Now, you want to have a big enough byproduct financially to live the kind of life that you want to live, but I think you also have to prioritize what is that. And I can honestly say that money has never been the primary motivator to me.
Yeah.
I have fortunately always found ways to make money doing what I really love doing, which isn't always easy, but I've always done that, so far. And I say I'm fortunate, but I've also worked my ass off,
Yeah.
To be able to do that. So I think that if money is, I don't care what I do, as long as I make, $4 million a year, all right, you can make $4 million a year. What you need to do is slaughter cows and, sort their innards for various meat packaging products, spam, and, all of that. You still want to do it for the money? And again, by the way, I want to put an umbrella over all of this, is that fortunately, you've been in the position, I've been in the position maybe to take greater chances that people of less financial means don't have the luxury of.
Totally.
Some people need that income immediately because of their living circumstances. So I also want to be mindful of that because people's lives are different. And you made a joke earlier about Tony Robbins and you happen to say David Blaine, but you know, the thing is, I don't believe in the myth of replication. I call it the myth of replication, which is because so-and-so, like if you read The Millionaire Next Door or The 7 Highly Effective Habits of 7 Highly Effective People, to me, there is no prescriptive means for success other than best practices.
Yeah.
And, you know, once you get beyond the best practices, then you have to learn how to relate to people, how to deal with people, all the emotional intelligence it takes, because it takes a lot more of that ultimately. You know, you can always hire good accountants, you can hire good salespeople, you got to build a great team and all of that. But you're not going to replicate anybody else's life or success because you think you can do what they're going to do, because everything is different, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
You're not them. The people you know aren't the people they know, the circumstances they're at, all that sort of
The
thing.
market,
And I think there's a lot. Pardon?
The market's different. The environment's different.
Everything.
Everything.
Is. And, you know, everybody's always looking for that magic key to unlock the door to success.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen anything that works other than executing well on a good idea that reaches the marketplace in a way that consumers understand what it is and it's desirable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I was just out surfing with a friend, and he's a 63-year-old gentleman, and we went for a walk 3 or 4 years ago, and he said, "Hey, Khe, I want to start a podcast." And I tell everyone that wants to start a podcast, a newsletter, a YouTube channel, I was like, okay, great. You've got to do at least 50 before you really even know the thing, right? And really understand the texture of it, whether you like it, how it works, what your audience likes, and so on. And I'm happy to give you advice and so on. I have had that conversation 100 times in the past 9 years. Less than 10 people have made it past 25. And so it's like, well, and those are the people that are buying the book that's promising the replication. And then the 5, the 10 that did it, they're just like, okay, I know what I need to do. I just need to keep doing it. And yeah, maybe they'll get a coach to tweak, you know, one lever, and maybe they'll hire a consultant to read a book to tweak another lever. But they reach the point that there's no silver bullet. There's only gold finishes, so to speak, that even then are hard to acquire. And we were reflecting back. I'm like, it's that simple, right? And that's why I could say so confidently that many of you who are listening have these grand plans to not drink this year and, you know, start your newsletter and so on. But it's not going to happen. I just know statistically it's not going to happen. And I think you're right. So many folks are they want to, you know, control Command C, Command V. They want to copy and paste the thing that worked for X without taking into account the 9 million hidden variables that shape the outcome.
That's right.
So,
and again, it's back to the perseverance, isn't it? You know, those that give up after, the majority of podcasters give up after 8.
Yeah. They say if you make it to 20, you're in the top 1%.
Which is amazing, because it doesn't seem like it takes that much, but it's a lot of work involved. And, you know, it's, again, that comes back to that word perseverance. You know, you got to persevere to get at least 40 or 50 out there and find your audience and, you know, all of that sort of a thing. And I think that people grossly underestimate the amount of work it takes to get something done and out there.
Absolutely. Because especially in the era of the internet, the gurus are motivated to make it sound so easy that there's just download this 4-part playbook, download this 10-step program, right? And it never works that way. So, well, I have one last question for you. It gets to the heart of the exam in life. And my question is, Is creativity a required ingredient for a life well lived?
It's an interesting question because I look at it about all the things that feed creativity, and what I mean by that is I think curiosity is absolutely essential for a well-lived life. I think that engagement is absolutely essential. I think a sense of humor is absolutely essential. And I think connection to others is absolutely essential. And the thing is that if you seek those things, that'll often lead you to some kind of creative path. Maybe you love doing photography while your day job is at BlackRock.
Yeah.
And, you're able to pursue those things. You can do creative stuff. That's a hobby. I happen to have made the more difficult choice of doing creative stuff to make a living.
You and
But
me, and me both, my friend.
So I think that the key is, as I said, it's that curiosity is the fuel that drives creativity.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to solve some kind of a problem, whether the problem is, how do I get my ideas out there? What's the best way? Do I write? Do I paint? Do I sing? Do I play an instrument? Do I dance? Whatever it is. And I think that what is really important, this is often overlooked, is the only permission you need to do that is your own.
Yeah.
Because if you're asking permission of others, you're already putting yourself in the subservient position.
Yeah.
And if you truly want to be creative, you figure out how to do it. That's part of being creative.
Yeah. I love that. Jeff, beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm deeply inspired. I'm gonna go and be creative right now on the Friday afternoon. Yes, thank you. This has been such a helpful conversation, and I really can't wait for our listeners and viewer and subscribers to see it. So tell us where
you actually recorded this.
Well, we're actually gonna delete it, right? And then the joy was just the conversation, right?
That's it. I don't care about the outcome.
Fuck the sponsors. Fuck YouTube. Tell us where can people dive into your vast world of creativity and your vast portfolio of art and talent?
Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn, and every week I will post usually 4 or 5 clips from the guests I've had in class that share their insights. And what's wonderful is they don't agree with each other. So like in life, you different points of view, and you have to apply your own intelligence to make choices about, that I could do that. That works for me. There's the Instagram site, which is at a creative career, the @ sign and the creative career, madoffproductions.com, which is the website for my film business. I have also an Instagram site, which is B. Jeffrey Madoff, no spaces. And that's the black and white photography that I do, which I love doing. And I only do that totally for fun, totally to keep my eye and my brain engaged as I walk around this amazing city, which is New York, taking pictures, whether it's people or architecture or whatever. So I'd say any of those things, you can get an idea of what it is. You can get my book, Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas, available at Amazon and all fine booksellers. And so those are the ways that we can sort of touch base. And I do respond when people ask me about LinkedIn and following back and all of that sort of stuff.
Amazing. Well, that's a whole segment right there. Just all the places to follow you, which shows that you are preaching. Not only are you're practicing what you preach. So that is a true testament to who you are and what makes you such an incredible human being. So,
well, you're
very
thank
you
kind.
So much, Jeff.
You're very kind. See, that was the outcome I was hoping. I made all this shit up over the last hour, but I was hoping the outcome would be, well, thank you, Jeff. That was great. That was brilliant. And Little do you know that I faked my way through the entire thing. Now, thank you. It was great. As I knew it would be, I didn't take me courage to say yes when you asked me to be on your podcast, because I had the confidence from knowing you that we would have a good time doing it. So thank you.
Ditto for you as a guest. So thank you, Jeff.